Alrighty, folks, it's Tom, your frugal prepper. So, I'm going to show you how to make convert an AC adapter to work with your Big Buddy heater with the fan unit and stuff. I looked online, and by the time I paid shipping, it's like probably about $25. It was about as cheap as I was going to get an AC adapter. Excuse me. And, that's an awful lot of money. And so, when I was online on eBay looking at some, they had a real nice high-res picture of one, and I zoomed way in, and I saw that it was a 6-volt DC, 800 milliamps. And it also had a little picture of the jack on the end where it showed you that the tip of it was the positive. So I went down to the electronics store. Well, first I went to the thrift store. I went to the St. Francis thrift store. And I got this for $1.99. I just kind of went through the pile of adapters they had. Found the one that was at 6 volts DC of at least 800 milliamps. So, look around your junk pile if you have a junk pile of transformers and look around. And you could probably go a little bit less, like 5 volts, or a little bit more, like 7 volts, and it would be okay. And then I went to the electronics store, my surplus store. They'd have this stuff at Radio Shack too. And I got this, which I think is the 1/8 inch jack. And this is the 3mm jack. And I wasn't sure which size it took off the top of my head, so I just bought both. Now, the actual one on the picture I saw just had the mono tip, which it has 2 conductors separated by this little plastic black insulator. But mine does take this smaller jack. That's the one that fits. But this one's stereo, so you actually have 3 conductors. Now, most of the time on these, your ground will still hook up towards the back, so you don't have to hook up this middle pin. Now, if I plug this in when I'm done and it doesn't work, then I'll go ahead and make this middle pin ground as well as this pin. And then this very tip's going to be the positive. So, I've cut the existing end off the AC adapter. I left a little bit there, and I'll throw this in my junk box because someday I may need an end like that. And I got my wires here. So I'm going to strip those, and then we're just going to test them to see which one's positive. A lot of times, the stripe on these is negative, but we're just going to make sure. Okay, so what I have here is my little analog meter, is what I'm going to be using for this. Let me prop it up here, show you. Now, I'm going to make sure that the black lead and the red lead are plugged into the right places. And then my meter, since it's analog, it doesn't show you negative voltage. So if you hook this up and the needle jumps backwards, you'll know you can switch the pins. Or you can switch the polarity of the leads with this little knob right here. And then the red becomes the positive. Or the black becomes the positive. But basically, I'll just set this down to 10 volts. And then we'll go ahead and measure this out. I'll plug this in. I've stripped the wires. And we'll measure this out. If you have a digital meter, this is easier because you just hook it up. And if it's backwards, it'll show you negative, and you'll switch them until it's positive voltage, and then you'll know that the red is your positive. But that's how you figure that out for sure. Okay, folks, so like a lot of these things, I figured out by switching my leads. I put these little alligator clips on my test probe, and I actually just keep these right on my meter. They're taped to the handle. So I figured out that the white stripe wire on this one is positive. Now you'll see, like, man, this thing is like real close to 10 volts, and it does clearly say on there that it's 6 volts. Don't flip out about that, because chances are I'm gonna hook a couple of resistors in series across here. These are pretty low ohms, so I can only do it for a minute. But you'll see that the voltage will drop right to a more acceptable range under load. So it gets much. So once it gets some load on it, that voltage will come down, and it should be fine. Um, so basically, that's gonna be acceptable. So I'm going to go ahead and just put the end on this cable now, and I'll kind of show you as good as I can with one hand how I'm doing that. Okay, folks. So I've taken my plastic thing off. I slid that back on my wires. It's important not to forget that step, or all this you do for naught, because you'll have to cut it off. And then I've taken and soldered, or I'm going to solder. I've put my wires through this little hole in the bottom, which is the ground, and this little bracket on the side, which is the tip. And the way I determine that is by using my meter. If you want to determine where those go, most meters will have either, this has a continuity setting, and all that means is that when your two test probes touch, they make a beep to let you know that there's continuity there. Now, if you don't have a continuity, you'll normally have a resistor setting that says ohms. Set it to any of those, and then you can touch your leads together, and you'll see that the needle jumps up. Now, this isn't exactly calibrated. You'd have to zero it out to calibrate it, and that's what this zero adjustment knob is. But we're not actually measuring ohms. We just want to see if there's continuity. So if it's a digital meter, it'll read somewhere close to zero when you touch the two ends together. But if you have one that has this continuity with a beep setting, it's real nice, because you don't have to take your eyes away from the project or what you're measuring. You just hear the beep and know it made contact. But basically, all I did then was take and touch like the back of this and this, and and you see which tabs on here will make contact with which little pins up front. So again, ideally I'd have this mono jack, and the tip would be ground, and the whole back, or the tip would be positive and the whole back part would be ground. So the way I'm hooking this up now, since this is really what they call a stereo jack, so you could have a right and a left and a common. My ground is hooked up in the very back part, and my positive's on the very tip part, and there's nothing hooked up to that middle piece. Now, if this doesn't work when I plug it in, I'll come back in and I'll solder a little bridge in between the other tab that goes to the middle piece and the ground. Because the prong in that connector may be a little farther forward. But I found like most of the time anymore, your different places will use the receptacles for these that are also wired in stereo, and they'll use the back part as ground. Just because those are more prevalent when they're building consumer electronics. There's a lot of them out there. So I'm going to go ahead and solder this up now. My iron's heating up, and then I'll be back once I get it soldered. Okay, folks. So I've gone ahead. Let me get some light down here, maybe. I've gone ahead and soldered that connection there and this connection here. Now the next thing I want to do is make sure there's no shorts between any of this. I'll see if I can do this one-handed here. Basically, I've got my meter on continuity, and what I always like to do is just give it a touch before I start. And what I'll do is I'll slide this probe up here, under here, to where it's touching that ground piece. And it should short the ground, and it does. And I'll test the middle one and the tip. Uh-oh. I think I might have a short. Do I have a short? That's really strange. Oh, you know what that is? That's just because it's kind of shorted back through the transformer or the bridge rectifier back in the power supply. I hear a little bit. Nothing there, nothing there. And if I just go into the middle one here and test over here to the edge, there's nothing. Okay, so we're not shorted. And so now I'll slide my black cover back up on here and twist it on, and we'll go plug this into the heater and see what happens. Okay, folks, so I took that right out of my, I took the batteries out of my buddy heater, plugged this in, pilot light fired right up, fan comes right on, so this works just fine. Now, I'm going to show you a little modification I'm going to make here, just to make sure that this never shorts out. Okay, now, if you can see here, just how close together these two little contacts are that are soldered. My concern is if this really got kicked or yanked, those two could short out. Now 800 milliamps probably ain't enough to start a fire, but I just like to be sure. So what I'm going to do, I tried a small piece of electrical tape, but that's still just kind of hokey. I'm not really liking that. So what I'm going to use is this hot glue gun and just fill in between all those connections with some hot glue, let it cool, make sure they won't touch, and then we'll slide the cover up on it. So that will keep all of those from being able to touch, keep them insulated. Okay, so I took it, I filled that, I gave that all in real good with hot glue and screwed it up on there real tight real quick. So it's pretty much, I don't even know if it's going to unscrew now. It's pretty much permanently mounted on there, and if I ever need to take it off, I bought a couple extras because they were 25 cents, and I'll chop it off and put a new one on. So, but that should really be good for forever. I'm going to go plug this into the heater now and show you that it works. Alright folks, I got my cord running down here. It's plugged into the back of my big buddy. And so I'll go ahead and light the pilot. That's lit. Okay, crank it. It seems to light better on medium. Okay, it's lit. I can crank it back down to low once it's lit. I might just crank it on up to high. Let it go. Here, there. Okay, now she's putting out the heat. I'll crank it back down to low. And now I can kick on the fan right here. It blows out the heat. This is going to be handy because it's going to be down to like -20 or some crazy stuff tonight. With like a wind chill fast, it's like -20 with a wind chill factor of -1,000,002. I don't know. It's super cold. There's a big giant propane shortage going on. I managed to go get 2 of my bottles filled before they ran out at Tractor Supply. So, and I really didn't need to. I got plenty stored, but hey, I'd rather have it and not need it. And they hadn't marked it up that much yet. So, they're cranking on up to medium here, put some heat out. But, so now for like $2.25 and, a half hour a time, I didn't have to buy this $24 adapter that they try to sell you for these things. So hopefully maybe that'll help somebody else save some money too. This is Tom, your Frugal Prepper.